Okay, second video. I'm recording this actually right after the other one, so if my mouth is dry, forgive me. Why do I think we're technologically stagnant, or I should say not as advancing as quickly as we should be? And the answer is slavery. What? Bear with me. The Roman Empire never got rid of slavery. Something they carried over from basically human tradition. The Greeks had it. The Romans, they had concrete. They had a republic. They had unbelievably good technology. They took human civilization further than it had ever been, as far as we know, at that point. And they never got to an industrial revolution. Why did they never get to an industrial revolution? I propose, and I'm not the only person who says this. In fact, I assert that this is a fact. All right. But I feel strongly that it's because they had slavery. If labor doesn't cost anything because labor is owed to you, because you own the fruits of somebody else, you have absolutely no incentive to innovate. You're just going to keep. You're going to think that labor is completely it's like why would you want to automate? Why would you want to invent the cotton gin or automated farming? You just have slaves for that. So you live fat. Maybe you advance the arts and you advance certain things that are more of like larger engineering challenges, roads, but you never automate. And if you never automate, you never hit an industrial revolution because there is no incentive to get energy from anything other than basically human labor. Romans, they never got into the Industrial Revolution, and they collapsed. If they had hit an Industrial Revolution, they wouldn't have collapsed. They'd probably still be around today. But they didn't make it because they had slavery. Now, what happened with the United States Civil War? All right, the British Empire, to their credit, decided, okay, no more slavery in the British Empire. They said, it's wrong, it's a moral abomination. We're going to, every place where the British Empire was, which is basically the largest landmass ever controlled since the Romans before, they said no slavery. And right as they did that, they hit an industrial revolution. Steam engines, all kind of coal, power, electricity had been discovered, but we knew that ancient civilizations understood that there was something to this electricity anyway, but somebody finally figured out how to harness the power. Now, the U.S. had been working on that, but where had the U.S. been working on that? In the North. In the South, where they had slavery, there wasn't innovation. And ultimately, I believe that is why the South lost the Civil War. Because although they were better prepared when they started militarily, they could not keep up with the industrialization. And they knew that they were going to have to give up their slaves moving forward. I guess ironically, the British were helping the South because they were still pissed off at us from, us kind of rebelling from them. It's not too, you got to remember, it's like, 25, 30 years after War of 1812 when they burned down Washington, D.C. We weren't always good friends with the British. But my point being that the North won the Civil War, which definitively ended slavery, and it also ended slavery economically because it basically said you can have free labor. You can have every advantage possible, and you will lose to somebody even slightly less matched than you if they are industrialized, because they lost to the North. In the South, they were kind of third world until well after Reconstruction, when basically the slaves had evaporated. Slavery was gone. The South was forced to industrialize, and the South was doing way better. In fact, they're doing better than the North are right now, especially if you look at places like South Carolina and auto manufacturing and stuff like that. The South is way ahead. Now, why do I think I think we don't have slavery? So what does this have to do with the down? We do have slavery. And it's not the hippy-dippy communist, every time you work for a paycheck, that's the bourgeoisie oppressing you, slavery. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is two things. One, this is the one everybody agrees with. Mega corporations, through globalization, such as Nike, such as Apple, such as I'm trying to think who else over there. Google to a degree, even Amazon, even Walmart is involved with this because they're in the supply chain. They're able to essentially export their labor to places like China, who are using slave labor. Now, does that mean we're directly enslaving people? No, because sometimes in a third world country, you can open up a factory and, pay a lower wage, but that means a lot of money to them. But that's only the case if their people are free. In China, which is the largest labor base in the entire world, that's not the case. The people who do it have to do it. They are under the same CCP, PLA banner. If you look at the Uyghurs and political prisoners, they're working in sweatshops. They are slaves. These people are slaves whether they are living comfortably or not, because they are slaves to the state. And some of the people are just, slaves because they're Chinese, they're dissidents. So then they're thrown into labor camps. And these corporations, it's not just the U.S., it's the European corporations and anybody who's doing basically global manufacturing and is in China, which is where the majority of manufacturing is done, they're using slave labor. So there's no incentive to bring the manufacturing back to the United States or back to home to innovate, to get robots to do things more efficiently, to use energy smarter. There is no incentive for that because the labor is free. So are you going to take the risk innovating in the United States, even though the energy is cheaper, even though the laws are better, even though you actually have to treat people like human beings? Are you going to take that risk if the labor is essentially free over in China and you've got the government, Chinese government throwing money at you to open up shop? No, and what that does is that stifles innovation. It is not unlike the Roman Empire, just that now it's happening globally. So we are advancing, especially with like microtech, but we've kind of stopped. And or to say we've slowed down significantly, and we've done that, I think, largely because we come up with something, and then we manufacture it, and then the Chinese start manufacturing it cheaper, and they use slave labor. So we never advance. There's never that like, wow, there's this high demand for this, and it's really good, and there's so many people who want it, and we can make so much money. I just got to figure out how to bring the cost down. Instead of us finding an innovative way to do that, or an alternate product, or inventing something new, they just ship it over to China. That's not good. That's not good for human civilization. That's not good for America. That's not good for anybody. That's not good for the Chinese, that's for sure. So I think that's one major part. Part two, illegal immigration. Also, third world immigration in general. I'll say it's not as pronounced, but illegal it definitely is. California, for example, if you try to say, look, we gotta send these illegals home, and the first thing they say, at least the first thing they used to say, is who's gonna clean the toilets? Who's gonna pick the crops? Who's gonna do all this other menial stuff that they get paid basically nothing for? Well, that labor base is there, and that is so tempting. Because it doesn't require any planning, it doesn't require any investment, it doesn't require any risk to pay those people dirt, essentially slave wages, to do stuff. There's no incentive to figure out a robot that picks things or do hydroponic farming where you can like have a building with a greenhouse and stuff. There's no innovation. There's no incentive there is no incentive to improvise or invent new because essentially it's slavery. Now, that's why a lot of people think we're being compassionate by letting the third world dump themselves in here, by letting basically poor Mexican peasants who don't know what's going on, and not just Mexico anymore. Really, it's most of like basically Central America, and just letting them pour in and then letting them shine our shoes for a nickel. Oh, that's compassionate. That's not compassionate. In fact, it is the antithesis to human civilization. keep those people where they are. That they're basically, they'll figure it out how to fix their own countries. We'll stop being the pressure valve, and then us, we can advance civilization, make life better for everybody on the planet by inventing new things and solving the labor problems that we're going to have by basically rejecting slavery and moving on to the next big thing. Now, in the future, if we ever get past this, what will slavery look like in the future? I don't know, but I suspect it's kind of the human condition to keep reverting back to that, because we're at that point right now, I feel. And then that stifles innovation, and then I mean, we're on a knife's edge here. Like the United States, I mean, granted, we've only been around 200 years, and the Romans are around much longer than that, but we're kind of going to go either direction. I mean, especially if you look at the election, we're going to either basically go back and essentially play ball with China and let in the illegals and perpetuate basically the slavery and the stagnation and let the, Chinese rise to just mass. They have slavery. They don't have labor problems. They're just going to enslave whoever they want. ISIS was enslaving people too, but they don't invent shit anyway, so they don't mean much. That's why China steals so much IP. They steal so much intellectual property because they have no incentive to innovate on their own because they have slaves. And they don't think of it like that. But they're like, oh, why are the Americans so innovative? Like, we have a fraction of their population. We're not any smarter than the average Chinese person. We're not special. It's not because we're not IQ or racially or ethnically special. What we are is culturally special. United States, this is what American exceptionalism is. We made a decision. We said no to slavery. We believe in basically the founding principles of this country, and we're going to stick to them as best we can, and that's going to take us the farthest. I still fully believe that. But if we're using illegals as slave labor, if we're benefiting from the Chinese slave labor and other slave labor in the third world, including Africa, Africa's got a lot of slave labor, and the Chinese, when they don't want to manufacture something, they go to Africa and have them run the lithium mines. Yeah, that's slave labor. Why is mining still being done by hand, right? Wouldn't you think it would be automated by now? No, it's not, and it's not any safer than it used to be, because the labor was free. It's slavery. If you don't have to pay somebody to take a dangerous job, or you put them in such a destitute situation where they're essentially forced to, there's no incentive to innovate. And somebody who is willing to take the money and push their morals aside will be the person running the show as long as slavery is legal. Now, because we're on a global scale, everybody's affected by that. United States, I'm not saying that we're guilty of this uniquely. We just happen to produce the most, and we happen to have the highest demand for things, so we're inevitably tied in. But on a global scale, everybody starts buying from each other. The people with the country that has slavery has a huge advantage, but it's a false advantage because it completely stifles innovation. So, what am I saying? I'm saying we got to get off China. We got to stop with this illegal crap. We got to call out the mining and the BS that's going on in Africa. We have to the Indian slave labor in parts of the Middle East, like Indian, like they bring people in and they don't let them leave. We gotta resist that at every point, even if that means us not getting a product cheaper for a temporary amount of time. That means build stuff here. Build stuff in the United States. Build stuff in Australia. Build stuff in Japan. Did Japanese have the same problem? Japanese, you'd think they would have all kinds of robotic stuff. They love that shit. They love it. I love it too, but that's something in their culture. They really love the small and technical. That's why you got the PlayStation. That's really cool. But they've been serenaded by the easy, cheap labor in China. They just got to look the other way. Now they're pulling companies back. Probably they're pulling 87 or something manufacturing bases, plants back from China back to Japan. That's fantastic. That's great. I wish every country on the planet did that. Now, there's a risk. Of course, it puts China in a corner, and they either have to basically change the way they do things, or they got to lash out. And knowing how things go usually in history, they're probably going to lash out. But I think that's worth it. I think that's worth the risk. I think we have to crush this. And if we don't, I don't think we're ever going to advance. I think we're going to be always pulled back. Just the speed at which, just think about right after World War II, right? There wasn't globalization yet. There was just massive industrial bases, and the United States was free, and Germany and Japan, who were basically the oppressors who were enslaving and crushing everybody, had just been defeated. So the world was the Wild West. It was total anarchy. As far as, in terms of there is no macro overlord. And what happened? The U.S. went from, 1940s record players to every suburban home being filled with appliances. There was parts of the South during World War II that still didn't have electricity. There's just parts of the world. It was very what we would consider like unbelievably third world, ancient. Almost like 1800s level stuff occurring all over the planet. And what happened? We were forced to do everything ourselves because ain't nobody else going to do it but us. And the innovation was unbelievable. And the whole planet benefited from it. Not just the United States. Everybody benefited from it. And I think pretty much globalization in the 90s kind of kneecapped that. Think about where we were in 2010. Is our technology all that different than it was in 2010? Not really. Now think about when you were in 2010, what technology was like in 1999. How about 20 years before that, 1990? You don't even recognize things. But for us, we just have, slightly better versions of what we had 10 years ago. Why has the innovation stopped? That right there, the slavery in China, this global economy that basically feeds itself off of slavery, that is why stuff has stopped advancing. So, I just shoot your ear off for 17 minutes. But think about that. Think about that next time somebody says it's compassionate to just let, third worlders pour into a country to take menial jobs. That, the dealing with China and these other countries that basically run sweatshops that's a net good because, then they have jobs. No. Slavery. And we got to stop it. And only us bringing stuff back from China. Hopefully this whole virus thing has pissed off everybody enough to bring this stuff back. Then you wait and see. You think that the jump between basically 1945 and 1955 was big? You wait and see basically China getting cut out of the equation and seeing what 2030 looks like versus 2020 if we actually go through with this. That's going to be something. And I hope I'm alive to see it. I expect to be here in 10 years, but who knows? But I hope the slavery and the dealing with the Chinese just tolerating their essentially oppression and their enslavement of people. I hope that goes away on a global scale, or at least let us do it. At least let us cut those ties and say, nah, Nike, nah, you got slave labor. You can't sell your shoes. You can't sell your shoes. You're using slave labor from China. It just, go ahead, sell it internationally, but the United States on the market. No, we don't do it. We don't do it. Slave labor was used. Even if just the United States, for the U.S. consumer base, had to avoid basically buying stuff that was created through shady or slave labor means. Huge. It would be unbelievable, I think, the speed at which we would advance. So, might take a little while to get going again, considering our manufacturing base got gutted over particularly the last 10, 20 years. No, not so much the last 3 years, but before that, gutted. So, there's hope for the future, but we got to do some stuff, and we got to stick to our principles.